having said that, this when we try to kind of draw this in map, and as we know that the supply curve is kind of synonymous to this marginal cost, not literally but still, then a marginal cost, and we know this a marginal cost curve goes up. It's if it is a curve, then probably it should look like something like this, all right, and which passes through the average cost curve in its minimum point, right. So here we will take these marginal cost curves as something like this, where 0 means no output and my marginal cost curves goes up whenever I start producing. Yeah, and over here I have cost, so this is my marginal cost curve. And so often these marginal cost curves, when you draw the first one little steep, and you can just call it MPC, marginal private cost, not marginal propensity to consume or something. So marginal private cost, or just keep MC, marginal cost. Yeah, so that is the private cost. Of course, when we talk about marginal cost, we talk about only the cost out of the production process, or the inputs. Yeah, so the marginal private cost, and whenever we have this marginal private cost and we have an externality, and if it is a case of a polluting industry, or a negative production externality, or eventually a negative consumption externality, then there is an external cost. So when there is no production, the external cost is 0, and because nothing is being produced, so there is no harm actually. So otherwise the moment it starts producing, it starts polluting the industry or the environment, the industry starts polluting, and therefore it should be marginal social cost. Yeah, and this difference between the marginal private cost and marginal social cost should be the marginal external cost. This difference is the, say, this difference is the marginal external cost, because together MPC and MEC, this vertical difference, yeah, together this MPC and MEC gives this MSC, like marginal social cost. Now what happens is, when I have my demand curve which comes out of the benefit, and then how I can draw my demand curve, again the benefit, that's primarily because it's a downward sloping, and because of a diminishing marginal utility. So I will draw my demand curve as like this. So you can call it a demand curve, but don't write it like this. You can call it a marginal social benefit. Yeah, why? You can eventually keep it as marginal private benefit, or you can keep it as a marginal social benefit. It hardly matters, because over here the external benefit is so low as compared to the external cost. So the marginal private, the difference between the marginal private benefit and marginal social benefit, very low. So and then they are similar, because marginal external benefit is low. So what happens when we don't realize that there is a marginal social cost, there is a marginal external cost? So the producer will produce at this point Q prime, so they will produce at this point, and we'll keep, now we'll talk about, now this is a kind of demand and supply, this is a kind of market. So apart from cost and probably benefit, yeah, I will also keep price here. And then the price, when the the external cost hasn't been considered, the price is like what the inefficient market or eventually the polluting industry says, is not a P star, is P prime. So initially they will produce here. The moment we have this marginal social cost, yes, now the equilibrium should be social cost and social benefit. Yes, now even if I don't have this marginal social benefit, marginal social cost, I haven't yet realized that I have a marginal social cost. So naturally there is, I really don't know that, marginal external cost. So I don't know that how far that marginal social cost will be there, and till how far we can bargain, or the government can impose a regulation that you cannot produce more than that, or you have to, and then there should be a price regulation which pushes the cost. We'll learn about that. So the equilibrium is here. The moment it's like this, marginal social cost, then the equilibrium is here at this point, Q star, which raises the cost as well as the price, isn't it? P star, it raises the cost as well as the price. Why it raises the cost? Before going to this, I will tell you something about this particular area. This area is known as deadweight loss. This particular area is known as deadweight loss. Deadweight loss eventually can also be considered as excess burden when there is excess surplus or excess burden, or can be called as an allocative inefficiency. Yeah, this particular area. And whenever we have a deadweight loss, because eventually if I don't realize that my marginal social cost is here, and then I am creating a production which is socially not desirable at all, this particular area, because I have to produce on that Q star, I am manufacturing at Q prime, and then my price should be over here, but if I manufacture at this point, but it is not over here, and then there is an excess surplus because the supply is more, and there is an excess burden because that is not socially desirable, and then if that is having a high external cost, which leads to this market inefficiency called deadweight loss, then what we will do, the government has to bring a regulation. What they do, they can impose a tax. And here the government has to regulate. So yeah, so government regulations come in, so they can eventually bring kind of property rights. Yes, they can impose a tax, they can impose kind of or say the consumers bargaining ability. It's not directly from the government, but government can always pitch in and moderate over this bargaining ability. We'll talk about under Coase theorem. Yes, and there can also be a transaction costs, what government may ask these polluting industries to pay. Let us see. So slowly we will go one by one. So what happens in terms of this production when we have a property right? That means that when we have a property right, this particular industry or this particular firm doesn't really have any property right, means they are not regulated, they don't have a right to operate, they are not under the government's control, or they are under the supervision or monitoring framework. So and they can work on their own wish, because as long as the government is not intervening or interfering. So the importance of the property right is to introduce a kind of, or to establish a kind of authorization on that particular industry or the firm, so that their operations become more legal and comes under the framework, or the legal framework, or the under the scrutiny of the authority, and then they are supposed to abide by certain rules and regulations. And when they are as certain, they have to abide by the rules and regulations, then they cannot really overproduce, and then because they cannot overproduce, and that means that they are eventually reducing the cost, and they can certainly increase the price to make over on their the loss in terms of the quantity, because it will certainly increase the price. And because they have a property right, they may go for certain certifications, certain which additionally has some cost. But if there is a and then if they accept that yes, my firm is polluting the environment, then and having a property right, it is their responsibility to pay for the cost, to pay for the or to bear the cost of pollution or the polluting the environment. So once they bear the cost of polluting the environment, so naturally the price goes up, and then this price is equal to the external cost. So whenever there is a property right, and in that case the cost of pollution, which is basically borne by the polluter, is equal to the marginal external cost. Of course, cost of pollution of per unit of production. Yeah. So marginal external cost, and naturally when the price goes up, there is again the surplus falls down, and then the demand increases, because from here the price goes up, so the demand falls, and when the demand falls there is an excess surplus, is again excess supply, and so there is again a bargaining, because they cannot really increase the price by a lot of margin, increasing the surplus. At the same time, because of this taking care of this pollution, maybe the demand also doesn't fall a lot. So there is a consensus at this point where the property rights bring a stability, and that is the equilibrium. Yeah, that is the efficient production. So at Q star, and then the P star is the price. Similarly, the next one is Coase theorem. It is it is propounded by Professor Coase. It's a very interesting theorem. Coase theorem. So what Professor Coase says, he says just few points. Number one, if property right exists, yeah. Number two, only a small number of parties involved, like say the industry or the firm, and then only few people around of parties involved. Number three, low transaction cost. Then all these can lead to an efficient production. Yeah, through bargaining. Through bargaining. So what happens when there is the production cost, the transaction cost is low, and only a few members are involved, so there is no chaos and not many decisions. If there are not too many decisions, then it is easier to take a decision, and the delay is not much, so the transaction cost overall goes down, and the property right is there. That means the industry accepts that they are polluting, but they are ready to pay for that. So what happens is that those people around the industry, they go, they approach them, they have a discussion, and the industry pays exactly that amount as a compensation towards these people, either their health cost or some compensation towards the people of those who are affected, and then that the compensation is exactly equal to the external cost, and then the of course marginal external cost means with every unit of production what is the additional compensation they require, that is the compensation, not only average compensation, it is an incremental compensation. Yeah, so that is the the estimation part, that how much extra, if they produce one more unit, how much extra they have to pay as a compensation to those people who are being affected. So this is a Coase theorem. Yeah, but when there are too many parties involved, or the cost is really high, then the industry may deny to pay for that, number one, and number two, additionally what can happen, that the consensus, bringing the consensus is also very difficult. So over there the government pitches in, so when the government pitches in, that means government takes a stand or a decision when transaction cost is high and number of parties and a large number of parties, number of stakeholders. Yes. So and that means when the transaction cost of is low, then only this Coase theorem is applicable. So only these three conditions: one is the private cost, the transaction cost is low, they have this property right, and number three is that only few members are involved. So it often happens with a polluting industry. It happens with a for a regulatory firm, a realtor estate, or somebody, maybe a dam, somebody establishing a dam which has a serious negative impact on a few people, those who are surviving around that area, cultivating or something. So that can have a serious impact on their livelihood. So it's like that. So the next one can be when we talk about the and eventually when this government takes care, when the Coase theorem doesn't work out, then we can name them as government charges, some taxes, and then we can name them emission charges, right? Emission charges. Or government can eventually ask them for a marketable permit. Yeah, eventually ask them to go for a marketable permit. That means you can maximum produce or manufacture till this many unit, or this is your maximum allowed amount of production. Before this you can maximum market this much. Before that you cannot market in a particular given time period. So even if you manufacture, they are not going to get going to see the daylight. So it's like that. So another way the government can deal with this, or the system can deal with this, is imposing these emission charges or a tax directly, right? And this tax, often known as Pigovian tax, under Professor Pigu. Yeah, this is known as Pigovian tax. So what Pigovian tax says, that it is very simple: marginal private cost plus that amount of tax together is marginal social cost, right? So this tax, again, as the transaction cost, as the permit, the property right, not the permit, the property right. To get that property right, they have to spend something, they have to pay something, or certification or something like that, or some treatment plant they have to get. So that has a cost, right? So that is one. Otherwise, if they don't have a treatment plant, they don't get the property right. So all this, and then this tax or this, the consumer's bargaining ability, that transaction cost, everybody is equals to this external cost, right, marginal external cost, and that's how it is estimated, that what will be the tax amount, what will be the emission charges, and how best you can work out, or how best you can identify the external cost, and that you're working out of the taxes or the emission charges or whichever these mechanisms are will be efficient. And therefore, when we look at this this diagram, yeah, so this is the, in case of tax, this is again the amount of tax, right, and again because of this tax, in property right they are taking care of this price, the transaction cost is this cost, but because of this tax again the price is increased from here to here, but the quantity is decreased, right, from here to here. Anyways, now we'll discuss about the external benefit. So what happens in case of external benefit is, again, as in case of benefit we talk about the positive externality, and whenever we are talking about positive externality, our demand curve or our benefit curve will shift, not the cost curve, because the marginal external cost for that for that particular production or consumption is too low. So just what we have seen in our previous diagram, it goes like this. So we had a social cost curve and then the social benefit curve. So when we have a social cost curve something like this, marginal social cost, and then we can have a marginal social benefit curve, right? I mean, sorry, first one is marginal private benefit curve, right? You can write MB as well, marginal private benefit, and this is your quantity, this is your cost, benefit, and finally the price. Yes, and at that point where your marginal, you were just thinking about your marginal private benefit, it eventually intersects, finds the equilibrium in the intersects with the marginal social cost, and this is my Q prime and this is my P prime. But unlike our negative externality, we where it was a polluting and then it has a external cost. So and then to bring down the level of cost, external cost, or to bring towards an efficient equilibrium or efficient output, we had to decrease the quantity so that the pollution or this external cost, total external cost, is reduced, and then the deadweight loss is vanished. That inefficient part is vanished. Similarly, over here, as it has a benefit, it should not be underproduced, right? So the society should get more and more benefit out of that particular production or consumption. So whenever there is a benefit, the best example is, which is the fundamental example, as a person who cultivates bee, and then those bees actually go to pollinate the nearby farmers' farms or plants. So those who is having the bee or the bee cultivator or the honey maker, his business is actually bringing a positive benefit or a benefit towards those farmers, because they don't have to pay anything to pollinate their plants, So, but if they don't find any motivation, any subsidies, compensation, any remuneration against that their business is helping others' business, they feel demotivated, and then they will keep their production at a very low level, because their honeys are going out, and maybe that also affects their business. So over here again they can work out a plan that they give some incentive, pay some money to this particular person, like the farmers pay the honey maker, and then he finds the motivation, or the government says, oh my god, it's fantastic, because now they don't have to use any particular fertilizer, it's a natural process, it's good in terms of health, so let us pay this person, and then let me encourage him to increase his potential of honeys or number of bees, you know, from 100 to maybe 500. Yeah. So in that way, the marginal private benefit, if there is a marginal external benefit, should be a curve which is above the marginal social benefit, and this difference is this vertical difference is my marginal external benefit. Yes. Therefore, now you can see that because of this marginal social benefit and marginal private benefit, what is happening, the I mean marginal social benefit and marginal social cost, what is happening now, they are finding a new equilibrium, right, over here, which increases the output. So, this equilibrium is the efficient equilibrium, and because of this equilibrium, maybe the price goes up, you know, because of the price, because even if the price goes up, but they can eventually make up for this deadweight loss, because this is the level of inefficiency. This is the deadweight loss. This is the amount of output which is contributing towards this deadweight loss, right? And this is the difference between the benefit, external benefit and external cost. Social benefit and private benefit, which is upon the social cost, of course, in the initial output level, equilibrium level, and this external benefit level is actually, and this external benefit level multiplied by, you know, with this, the difference of the inefficient and efficient output is actually the total deadweight loss. And eventually, how, you know, this particular scenario can be improved is, or you know, an efficient output can be achieved, primarily the government's action, as giving subsidies, public provisions, that okay, fine, you do this, I will give you a market, you know, or I will buy your products as a government. So they give a fair price, you know. So government says, I will buy your product, but you know, you just increase the scale. That's what they do, and for many, you know, say organizations, yeah, then they can give them, or in terms of subsidies, you know, the tax exemption or subsidies, that's what they are doing for these startups, small startups, or the patents and copyrights. Yeah, because they are innovating something which has a strong societal implication, you know, you continue this innovation, and then I will give you the right to sell that product for 10, maybe for 10 years. Yeah, so this patent and copyrights again will help them. So 10 years means having a kind of monopoly, and which helps them to expand in that market, and when they can expand in that market, so they can gain a market, build a market for them. So there is naturally a higher output, and slowly, you know, the social benefit is actually being achieved by that. So similarly, a public, in case of a public provision, the authority, you know, the public authority or the government, which receives the payment from the government, you know, the public authority means that the producer is getting a payment from the government, and then they are saying, fine, you know, I am paying for you, and then you have to produce this much for me, and the government estimates this Q star amount, and then says that you have to increase your production from here to here, and for this I will make the payment. So it's a kind of you know, a motivation, of course, for this particular government, for this particular organization, which has to move towards the efficient output. Eventually, there can be a condition where if my marginal social cost is something like this, and maybe this is my marginal social benefit, you know, and the marginal social cost, if it is, it can also shift, you know, or if it is my marginal cost, it can also shift, it will increase, and maybe I have a marginal private benefit, it can also increase, but if then you need to estimate that which is more, you know, marginal private benefit is more or marginal social cost is more, sorry, marginal social benefit is more or marginal social cost is more. Eventually, which is that, you know, the externality for the benefit or for the cost, which is more, and based on that you will estimate your whether you will you know, marginal social cost and marginal social benefit, or you will manufacture in marginal private cost and marginal private benefit. If, you know, considering the external cost and external benefit is positive, then you have to decide that which way you will go, you know, or the government has to decide that how things should work, whether I will tax them or I will subsidize them. Yes, so this is all about the externality, economic externality, and then we see that how in case of benefit we increase our output towards the efficiency, and how in case of cost we decrease the output towards the efficiency. Of course, just by understanding the amount of external cost and external benefit, and then either giving a subsidy equal to external benefit, or a provision, or a, you know, patent, or give a property right or a emission charge or some transaction cost or Pigovian tax equal to external cost, so that it comes back towards a efficient output where the social cost and social benefit is actually bringing you the equilibrium, not the private cost and private benefit. Thank you very much.